Hi there, and welcome to my comprehensive guide to the Amber Sapphire midrange deck in Disney Lorcana. This deck has seen a huge increase in popularity in the last couple of weeks, and after playing with the deck myself, I can assure you that it is the real deal and will likely remain a tier 1 deck until the second set arrives to shake up the meta. While the deck is a bit soft to aggro decks, this midrange deck boasts some of the most ink-efficient creatures in the game. This allows it to absolutely dominate the board in midrange matchups, and the draw power of Amber allows it to go toe-to-toe with control decks. These 13 cards are what I would consider to be the core of the deck. I would strongly recommend playing these cards as 4-ofs in almost all cases. Doing so maximizes your chances of enacting your game plan in every matchup. The early game cards of Stitch, Simba, Philoctetes, and Maximus primarily play the role of slowing down aggressive decks. You should be mulliganing to make sure that you have a couple of these cards in your opening hand. If you find yourself in a mid-range matchup, it's totally fine to not play these cards and instead ink them, as long as you make sure that you don't fall too far behind on board. Mickey, on the other hand, serves the role of accelerating us to our powerful late game plays. One of the strongest plays available to the deck is curving turn 3 Mickey into turn 4 Maleficent. Both Hades and Rapunzel are mid-game card advantage engines that allow us to keep our hand full while playing to the board. Maleficent is a massive character that threatens to challenge your opponent's smaller creatures and will end the game quickly on her own if she isn't stopped. All of our late game cards serve as card advantage engines as well as powerful threats. Robin Hood ensures that you have answers to evasive creatures, and Hades can take out any key threats, which provides a huge tempo advantage, and he costs 2 less than 9-drop Maleficent. Stitch is nearly unkillable with 8 toughness and guarantees that your hand stays full with plays for future turns. For utility spells, we have Let It Go and You Have Forgotten Me. You Have Forgotten Me is an extremely important card against the control decks as well as in mid-range mirrors. You might need to ink it against aggro decks because you just won't have time to play it. Let It Go, on the other hand, pairs with Hades to form our 8-spell removal suite. It's also nice that in this deck we have a ton of characters that can actually sing it for free. If you were to play all of the previously mentioned cards as 4-ofs, that would leave you with 52 cards in total. That means there would be 8 more slots that you can use to customize the deck to your liking. If you want to shore up your aggro matchups, you can play cards like Flounder or Mr. Smee. Flounder gives you another 1-drop, which can be vital in decks that are playing to the board extremely quickly, like Lemon Lime aggro. Mr. Smee is a 3-drop that has huge stats and pairs extremely well with Rapunzel and does a good job of controlling the board. If you want to add a few more mid or late game threats, Jasmine's ability works extremely well in this deck because of all the high toughness characters. It also gives you another character that you can ramp into on turn 4 with Mickey. Scar, on the other hand, actually acts as a removal card against exerted characters. You can play this like a giant Maximus, and after taking out a threat on the other side of the board, Scar then himself threatens to take out more characters or quests. For additional utility options, we have 2 songs in One Jump Ahead and Be Our Guest. One Jump Ahead gives us another ramp spell to reach the late game faster, and Be Our Guest increases the threat density of our deck. It also allows us to find our most powerful spells in the late game. Eye of Fates, on the other hand, is a unique item. It allows us to quest faster, and can sometimes surprise an opponent by finishing the game when they thought we could only get to 19. Here I've included a sample list. For simplicity's sake, I've included 4 copies of all of the cards I consider core cards. And then to make up the last 8 slots, I chose 2 Mr. Smee, 2 Scar, and 4 copies of Be Our Guest. The Amber Sapphire midrange deck has a pretty strong matchup spread across all of the tier 1 decks in the format. Here I've included what I think the approximate matchup split is for a number of the most popular decks in the format. I think the Ruby Amethyst control matchup is pretty even. You can get ahead on board and then start questing, and then in the late game, after the Be Prepared, you have the Hades into Hades combo, which is extremely important. You'll always want to make sure that you have 1 4-drop Hades in your hand so that after the board is wiped, you can always rebuild. In addition to that, you just want to make sure that you draw as many cards as you can, and you keep applying pressure. You'll also want to watch out for the 7-drop Aladdin plus Pocket Watch combo. I think the Amber Steel midrange deck matchup favors the Amber Sapphire deck just a little bit. Now, I will say that this matchup is extremely difficult to play for both players. You'll want to make sure that you're trading characters aggressively because your characters have better stats than their characters. That also minimizes the value of Big Tinkerbell as well as Grab Your Sword. The matchup versus the Lemon Lime aggro deck is perhaps the worst matchup this deck has. The number of early game cards for the Amber Sapphire deck is just not high enough, and we can't stop them from enacting their game plan. We also have no way of sweeping the board to catch up if we fall behind. The Bell ramp deck is actually really favorable for us. It's extremely rare that they're able to actually quest with Bell as long as you make sure to hold a Let It Go or Hades. In addition to that, you'll want to make sure that you're playing to the board as fast as you can so that you also get some value out of a whole new world. The Emerald Amethyst Tempo deck is another tough matchup. It plays a lot like an aggro deck with cards like Flynn Rider, and then it keeps us off the board with Genie in the late game, and it's usually enough to keep us from catching up. I've included the Amber Ruby midrange deck here just because I've started to see it a little bit on Pixelborn. It's not necessarily the most popular deck in the metagame, but I've left it here as kind of a proxy for other midrange decks. I think against midrange decks that aren't the Amber Steel midrange deck specifically, that is where the Amber Sapphire deck shines, and it absolutely destroys those matchups because the bodies in the Amber Sapphire deck are just too big. We get to maintain board control and there's nothing anyone can do about it. So why would you want to play this deck? Well, it's great in mid-range matchups. In fact, that's probably its greatest strength. It also has a lot of options throughout the game, which results in a high skill expression. There is no other deck in the Lorcana metagame that controls the board better through challenges. It also has the advantage of closing the game extremely quickly once it's ahead. Cards like Maleficent questing for 3, as well as a pile of cards in the deck that quest for 2, ensure that you won't fall behind to top decks. Additionally, it can also easily be tuned for the expected local metagame. Or maybe you're just a huge fan of butts, like Sir Mix-a-Lot, because this deck has the butts. Really, the only reason not to play this deck is if you expect a metagame that's heavy in aggro. This deck does struggle against aggro decks, and if you think that a large portion of your metagame will be aggressive, you may want to pick a different deck. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you give it a chance. This deck is really fun, and I've enjoyed all the games I've played with it so far. I'll also be releasing a series of videos I recorded of me playing the deck so that you can see some high-level Pixelborn gameplay of the Amber Sapphire deck if you want to. Also, I just started this channel and I'm really hoping to grow, so if you got this far, please like and subscribe to my channel. I know you'd be one of the first and it would mean a lot to me.